everything's in a very cordial, professional place. Obviously DK has requested a trade, and we are, entertaining that. We are talking to a ton of teams, taking offers, seeing what that looks like, and yeah, here we go. I mean, you always have to do the thing to understand here is that, our responsibility to, Jody Allen, the 12s, first and foremost is doing what's absolutely best for the organization. A, and then B, what's best for the player. Hopefully, both those things merge and it's an ideal situation. Sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't. Hopefully in this situation it does. And that'd be great. But worst case scenario, I mean, we have a amazing, explosive, powerful athlete playing receiver for us again in 2025. So.
Good morning, everybody. That was the voice of John Schneider, your general manager, president of football operations, yesterday on with Wyman and Bob on the John Schneider Show over there on Seattle Sports Radio. I am Brian Emhauser. Welcome to another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. Good morning to all of you out there this fine Friday morning. Hopefully the good weather will continue here in the Northwest. Got a good show. We're going to talk more about this DK Metcalf situation. I'm going to do some mock drafts. I've talked about doing those, but I'm going to do some mock drafts that involve a potential trade, at least one that I've got in place that I think is not out of the realm of possibilities, and we'll go through and see how that implicates the draft. And most excitingly, at 8 a.m. Pacific time, so in about 20 minutes, we'll welcome in one of the most intriguing draft prospects this year, Willie Lampkin. Out of University of North Carolina. Excited to talk to Willie. We'll show you some film of Willie. We'll talk to you about what some other folks are saying about him and why he's a guy that could be part of your Seattle Seahawks roster come this next season, depending on a few things. So we'll talk to Willie. We'll ask him how things are going, and excited to do that. So you heard from John Schneider there just now about the situation with DK Metcalf. And there's a few things in there that stood out to me. Most notably, I would say John Schneider is trying to portray this as you heard him say, a cordial situation, that DK is being a professional through this situation. And it behooves John Schneider for that to be the perception, right? Because, if it's acrimonious, if it's really not going well, then that only adds fuel to the fire, one, that he's going to have to be traded. And I still believe that the organization would love this to end up that DK Metcalf returns to the flock in Seattle. Two, it gives opposing teams that are looking to trade for DK Metcalf more ammunition that the Seahawks don't have the leverage here, and they're going to have to move him. So, in John Schneider's world, it does his position best to kind of turn the temperature down on this. But I think that's probably what's been going on for a while. And what did we see this past week? We saw DK Metcalf's agent turn the temperature up, right? I do think it was an accident that and John talked about that in this interview as well. I do think it was an accident that they released their news about DK wanting a trade on the same day that Tyler Lockett had his exit from the Seahawks. But I don't think it's an accident that they wanted to turn up the heat on this situation and try to push the Seahawks to make a move that maybe the Seahawks don't want to make. So it would not surprise me at all if the next salvo that comes from the DK Metcalf camp is not so cordial. And maybe if they really want to make this to the point of no return, DK Metcalf, his agent, Tony Condon, I might have that name wrong, but in any event, I know it's Tony, could start to say things about the Seahawks, about players, about the organization that would make it very hard for him to come back. So there's opportunity here for DK Metcalf's side to really make this less cordial and make things pretty uncomfortable for John Schneider and the Seahawks if they choose to do that. So I think we'll kind of obviously continue to monitor this piece. The other part of it that I thought was interesting and to some extent a shot across the bow of DK Metcalf's camp was this notion of, worst case scenario from John Schneider's perspective is that DK Metcalf comes back and plays for them in 2025. And they don't extend him, but they have him on the team. And that's a scenario that I believe is real. I do believe is real. Now, I think, as I said, there's things that DK Metcalf could do to make it really hard for the Seahawks to make that happen. But if you look throughout history of John Schneider and his ability and his interactions with even the biggest stars on his team, whether it was Marshawn Lynch, Cam Chancellor, Russell Wilson, on and on and on, he doesn't tend to cave. You might remember the Marshawn Lynch holdout in training camp, years ago, and ultimately they didn't give anything to Marshawn Lynch. They gave him a token, turning something to a guarantee or something along those lines, but he didn't get any additional money for it. And so I think agents know. I think people know in general that John Schneider's not just going to be pushed around in these situations. And that's him reasserting the fact that, hey, this guy's under contract. And DK Metcalf, if he really wants to play this out, he may have to play for the Seahawks next year. And not only that, but if he chooses to hold out and not play in games, there will be a point where he has to come back and play games, or he will not accrue a league year and he'll still be the Seahawks property the following year. So DK Metcalf ultimately will have to report to the Seahawks if that's what the Seahawks want. There's also a ton of pretty heavy fines that come from missing time in camp. There are a lot of game checks that you miss if you hold out during the league year. So it is not a easy path for DK Metcalf to say, all right, I'm going to call your bluff and I'm going to stick around here. There's a price to pay for doing that. So I think that the piece that I've kind of watched for here is where the team is kind of pressing and where DK Metcalf's kind of pressing. Like DK Metcalf with the whole thing of, hey, you know what? I want to play for a contender, which there's been some additional assessment that maybe what that meant, that was less about the Seahawks and more about, if I'm going to be traded, I want to be traded to a good team. And so there's also things that have come out that DK Metcalf wants to play in warm weather. I heard that from a number of NFL insiders. So all of those things kind of connect, and he may have to give on some of that stuff. Like ultimately, there might be a situation where he gets, imagine it's like a, what are those called? In Vegas, a slot machine, right? And you got different, imagine old school slot machine, not the new digital ones, right? And you got 3 wheels or whatever on there, and you can kind of have one that stays and you can pick others to keep spinning. Well, if DK Metcalf, one of those wheels is, how much money he's paid. Another of those wheels is where he plays geographically. And a third of those wheels is how good that team is. Well, the more he's willing to let all of those spin and wherever they land up, the easier it is for the Seahawks to get their best deal for him. The more the DK Metcalf tries to lock in some of those, I will only negotiate a contract with a team in hot weather, right? So geographic. I'm only going to go for a team that pays me this much money, and I'm only going to go to a team that's a contender. Well, then the Seahawks aren't probably going to get maybe the deal that they want. And if that's the case, DK Metcalf could find himself back in Seattle. And so that's kind of the poker game that's going on here is, sure, DK Metcalf can want what he wants. Ultimately, he's going to want to get paid. That usually is the thing that's the primary factor. He's a guy that I think probably believes that he can get a lot of money outside of football. He already has. He's got Hollywood stuff going on. So commercials, Lululemon, all that kind of stuff. So maybe he'd give up a little bit of money in order to be in Hollywood, or to be down in Southern California. Maybe he'd give up a little money to play for a contender. Would he give up the warm weather to get paid a lot of money and play for a contender? Green Bay. I don't think New England qualifies, but we'll see. So I think that's going to be the back and forth. I listened to, must have been a dozen or more different, I'd say credible NFL reporters. This is Mike Garofalo, Ian Rappaport, Adam Schefter, Albert Breer, Diana Rossini, on and on and on. All these different places. Daniel Jeremiah. And I heard Albert Breer make it pretty clear on Brock and Salk that the team would like the potential for this to be a situation where the door is still open and DK Metcalf can come back. I trust that actually the most. I think not only the way that he delivered the information, but his relationship there, I believe that to be the case. And I think you also, if you listen to John Schneider, I think they're trying to keep that door open. Mike Garofalo is on with Puck, Jason Puckett, does a great job on his YouTube channel. And Garofalo is always awesome. And he was like, no way, 100% chance DK's getting traded. Now, he was very quick with that, and it didn't seem sourced. He started to go on to say, well, once teams say this guy can explore trades, they're gone. That seemed like a generalization and not specific information about this situation. Maybe it's not. So there's going to be, I will say, I think there are conflicting reports out there about whether or not this is going to end up with with DK coming back. There's conflicting reports out there about what teams are willing to give up for DK Metcalf. And one of the things that kind of jumps out to me is, Diana Rossini, by the way, who shared that the Seahawks were looking for a first and a third. She then came on later yesterday and said she got a bunch of texts from teams once she put that out saying, good luck with that. And she kind of rolled that back of like, I don't know that the Seahawks are going to get that, but they're going to start with that as their asking price. I don't think the Seahawks are going to get that. I think it's the right place to start. And what will be interesting is what do they end up with? There's also the timing aspect of this, and there's conflicting reports about that. John Schneider said yesterday, I thought one of the most newsworthy parts of that conversation was, when do you want to get this done? Before the draft. They'd want to know how they were going to replace this loss if it happens. And that's pretty important, because if his timeline is before the draft, that could mean that, like, there's some folks that there seems to be more folks that think this is going to happen quickly than people that think it's going to drag on. I'm not so sure. I think these are really complicated. This is a situation where the team did not want to be in this situation. I think by all accounts, not by all accounts, but by enough accounts that's, and including my perception, they're not in a rush to do this. They're not going to be pressured. If they get a great deal, sure. But I think the series of events here is going to be next week. We're days away from free agency starting. There are going to be teams that sign wide receivers in free agency, and that might be enough for them. They may no longer be in the sweepstakes for DK Metcalf. There are other teams that might have thought they could get a free agent receiver, and they don't get that player. They may have a bigger need for DK Metcalf than they did before. And you'll see kind of the market, I think, solidify a week from now. So I think there's these windows of where deals could happen. I think that There is a window where this trade could happen next week. I could see it happening by the end of next week or early the following week after tier 1 of free agency is over. You're kind of into tier 2 of free agency. And then if it doesn't happen at that point, I think what that indicates is that John Schneider's not getting the deals that he's looking for, and he's going to sit on this. And I think that teams are going to play the waiting game. And John Schneider's going to sit there, and it's going to be an old-fashioned stare down in the West to see who fires first, or who blinks first, maybe in this case. And Schneider's not going to blink. So I think that this could go all the way to the draft. If it doesn't get done, late next week, early into the following week, you could be talking about into late April. Keep in mind, another important time frame, end of this month, is the annual league meeting. That is where all the owners get together. That is where, the coaches are going to be there. There is an opportunity for there to be a lot of face-to-face conversation. So I don't think John Schneider is going to feel pressure to have this done before then. I think if he gets a great deal, great. But it wouldn't surprise me at all if there's much deeper conversations down there in Florida, in Florida. So there's kind of a timeline to this, and it's going to be fascinating to watch. As I've said so many times, and I'll keep saying it, and I'm sure it's probably driving people nuts, but it's a MacGyver or MacGruber offseason, and this is the red wire. Like, you got to pick the right wire to snip right now. And if you don't, kaboom. Like, this one, he has got to nail it. And it's not easy. He's not in an easy situation. Keep in mind, like, we're all focused on this. John Schneider's also having negotiations with Geno Smith and his agent. We heard yesterday he's talking to Ernest Jones. He said, don't worry about the knee injury. That's, it was just a cleanup. It's not a big deal. And he's got to figure that out. I think that'll happen, likely right around free agency. It could happen today. I mean, they could get that deal done ahead of free agency. It wouldn't surprise me if it goes into free agency. And he's also got to be thinking about free agents. So, I mean, there is some chance, I don't think it's a high chance, there is some chance that John Schneider, knowing that he's got to turn his pretty much full attention to free agency next week, that this deal for DK could come together today, tomorrow, Sunday. Like, there is a chance, because that, if it doesn't happen then, John Schneider's going to put on the blinders, and he's going to focus on free agents and adding to this roster. By the way, Jeff Simmons and I will get together tomorrow. We will go deep on free agency. We'll revisit our top 10 picks for free agents. We will talk about the likelihood of some of these guys showing up for the Seahawks. So make sure you tune in tomorrow for Seahawks Saturday as we do that. And then next week, I mean, I don't know when it'll start. Definitely Monday. But I'll start doing shows, like kind of marathon shows, where we go through and we react to this information as it comes out. Jeff might jump on, other guys might jump on. We'll see. But going to be an interesting week next week. So looking forward to that, hanging out with all of you. So that, I think, kind of captures where things are with DK Metcalf. In about 10 minutes, we're going to welcome on Willie Lampkin. And I will, after that conversation with Willie, I'll do a couple mock drafts. I will say that I'll give you an idea of the trades that I have in mind for those mock drafts. The one that I have settled on is a trade with the Las Vegas Raiders that returns the Raiders' 37th pick, as well as their 73rd pick, which is a third-round pick. So, but what we would give back, the Seahawks would give back DK Metcalf, and they give back pick 137, which is a fourth-round pick. So what this would be is the Seahawks get a second and a third, they trade away DK Metcalf and they give away a fourth. So their fourth goes up from 137, from pick 137 to pick 73. So that's a pretty high. That's a pretty high third round pick, almost a second. And the Raiders get DK Metcalf in a fourth. So I think that's in the realm of realistic. I think the Seahawks likely are going to have to. The Seahawks are likely going to have to give back some sort of pick. I think a pick swap is likely to get the maximum, high picks back for them. And so I'll walk you through what it would be like if the Seahawks had the 37th pick in the draft, the 50th pick, which is already their second, so 2 seconds, and then 2/3, a 73rd and 82nd. We have not seen that yet, so I'll do that as well. There's a bunch of other trades that I'll work through, but not today. This is the one that I will work through. I'll probably do 2 different mocks with that trade in mind. So let me set up a little bit for you with Willie Lampkin, because this is a guy that is pretty fascinating. He is one of the smallest players you're going to see at the FBS level of college football. He mostly played guard, and he's like 5'10", 270. All right. And I've had fun talking about him as we Willie Lampkin on this show. But man, I got a lot of respect for this guy. He is tough as nails. And he did not get invited to the combine, which was honestly kind of a shock. He absolutely deserved to be there on a number of levels, but he didn't get the invite. And so I don't know where he currently sits in terms of pro day, 30 visits, all that kind of stuff. So I'll be asking him about that. Also, I'm going to be curious about figuring out whether or not teams are talking to him about other positions like fullback. And there is an eventuality here, a possibility here where Willie Lampkin, is a Seahawk, and that he is, for my money, he really fits like a John Schneider type of pick. And it also wouldn't shock me if Willie Lampkin doesn't get picked and becomes a priority free agent, that somebody signs as an undrafted free agent. And for what it's worth, that's a common, like a lot of the 30 visits people assume are just about players that they want to draft. There are definitely a portion of the 30 visits that are about that. But there's another portion that's about creating relationships and understanding guys that they want to recruit starting now as undrafted free agents. So I'll be really curious to hear. Don't know if Willie's going to share about that or not, but looking forward to that conversation here coming up any minute. If you haven't already given the show a like and click subscribe, please do. I would really appreciate it. If you haven't been over to jkboots.com lately, why not? Best boots you will ever own. Use code HawkBlogger. Gets you 10% off. Also, they're always running other deals and other things you can win. They were giving away a Ford Raptor at one point. So use code HawkBlogger, get 10% off. And then also the chance for you to win another pair of Seahawks-themed boots. Matt McManus has got his. They're gorgeous, and looking forward to that. Plus, we've also given away a lot of boots to charity. A number of Northwest Forest firefighters have gotten boots that help them stay safe while they're keeping all of us safe in the Northwest, as well as some LA firefighters. So it's a great promo. We're continuing this, pushing this on. So use code HawkBlogger over there at jkboots.com. All right, so the other piece that I kind of wanted to bring up here and is that free agency, man, as we start to head closer and closer to it, you got to wonder, like, there's going to be this huge cascading effect based off of what happens for the Seahawks. And John Schneider has talked about this, that there's a lot of pivoting. He talked about, even I think yesterday, about they didn't expect Draymond Jones to be a day one free agent. and yet he was. And they had to pivot, and they thought they were going to get Zach Allen, but they didn't. So they had to pivot. What happens if the Seahawks target Drew Dahlman, but they don't get him and they have to pivot? Well, all that's coming up, and all that's going to have some impact on our next guest. Willie Lampkin is just an unbelievable story, unbelievable player. And hopefully, I think Willie's on, but currently he's got his camera off, so he'll be back in a second. There he is. This is a guy that for the first time I got to lay my eyes on in person at the Senior Bowl, and what an experience that was. So let me introduce you to Willie Lampkin of University of North Carolina, coming to us from where today, Willie? Where are you coming to us from?
I'm in Arizona right now training.
Man, well, you got the sunny weather. It's great to see you. Thanks for coming on the show.
Appreciate you for having me. Thank you.
Yeah. So Arizona, that's a little bit different than Florida. You know, a little drier heat. How's training going for you?
Oh, it's been good. I've been out here with AMDG Sports. I've been training with them for probably about 2 years now. So I'm used to it. I came out here in 2023. So the last time I was out here, man, I was out here dying, tired. The heat got to me in the summer. It was so bad.
It gets really hot.
It was bad.
It gets really hot. I want to read a couple notes about you. I'm sure you've probably heard these, but one of these comes from Lance Zierlein, who scouts every year, writes for the NFL, NFL.com for every prospect. He says, "I just wrote up UNC's Willie Lampkin. Best run blocking tape of any offensive lineman this season. If he were 6'3", 310, he would be a first round pick, no question. However, he does measure 5'10", 270. But believe it or not, his wingspan is longer than Will Campbell's, who's going to go in the top 10. So I hear that, and then I listen to Brandon Thorne. Brandon Thorne, one of the best evaluators of offensive line talent, works and coaches with offensive linemen as well. Says Willie Lampkin's tape is very, very good this year for UNC. Knowing he did that at 5'10", 270-ish pounds is, all caps, bananas." So what do you think of, Willie, when you hear about those people evaluating you and your play?
It's great to, actually see people that know football. A lot of people out here don't really know football, and, they just have something to say. I'm just, thankful. I just want to thank God. I work really hard. I have a good team behind me. I just, bring my effort every single play. And, it's good to, see people actually seeing what I'm doing.
I got to admit, as a guy that's about 5'9", and, on a bad day, I'm 200 pounds because I don't want to be 200 pounds. People saying 270 is small has got to feel a little bit odd. There's not a lot of people in the world 270 and carrying it the way you do. You grew up in Florida, and not only were a really successful football player, you were an undefeated state champion wrestler your senior year. So talk about like football, wrestling, what started first, and how they helped each other.
I would say football started first. I started playing flag football at the age of, I think, 6. I got kicked off of a flag for tackling too much. I had to go to upper level. I would say I started wrestling my freshman year of high school. I was just like bored one day. Me and my friends, we were just at the school after football season. We were just like, man, let's go try this wrestling thing out. I was like, wrestling? What's that? Like WWE? They was like, nah, like actually wrestling. So I was like, all right, let's try it. So one day we went to the practice. It was like about 4 or 5 of us. Only 2 of us sticked it out. And I did okay my freshman year, but like I had like 40-something wins, 30-something wins, decent for my first year of wrestling. And then I just kept at it. And then I finally won the state title. And I would definitely say they go hand in hand. Is like having that dog mentality. It's one-on-one. So I can't call my coach if I'm losing. I gotta step it up. I gotta try harder, work harder. So I would definitely say having that dog mentality. Having leverage. A lot of people say leverage. Wrestling helps leverage. And I'll say this, having that will to win.
Man, the wrestlers I knew in high school, I was playing basketball or other sports, and I'd see them run around the gym, and in like tinfoil, jogging suits trying to drop weight. And those guys are some of the toughest guys I knew,
Yeah.
and we got into some tussles sometimes. We had fun, and man, not easy to move those guys, like leverage, strength. Um, you know, what were you always like? Were you always this weight? Like, when did you get to the weight you are? And did you have to cut weight certain times for wrestling? Or were you gaining weight for wrestling? How'd that work?
For wrestling, I was fat, man. I used to eat wings. Like I really wasn't on a diet. Like before the games, like they would let us go eat whatever. Like I would eat Wingstop probably every single game before Friday. We would go to Wingstop. I'll get like a 10-piece, 15-piece. So I was fat. I was fat in high school.
Well, you've also played different positions too, right? Like on the football field. So I think people know you mostly for your offensive line play, but you played linebacker as well.
Yeah, in high school.
Yeah, I mean, what kind of linebacker were you?
I played middle linebacker. I thought I was Ray Lewis out there.
Well, I would guess, you tell me if I'm wrong, I would guess that actually is kind of a helpful thing in that, offensive linemen, especially if you're doing zone blocking or pulling or something, actually targeting, the defender and actually hitting them, it's probably not that much different than being a middle linebacker and seeking out that running back and making sure you make contact there. Is that right?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, I would say in some sense, yes.
So why did you give up defense, become an offensive player?
Man, I was at this school called Mulberry High School. So like we weren't that good. Like so we were like, I think my freshman year when I started varsity, I think we were like 2-8. So the next year I was like, let me go try something different. We gotta win some games, you know what I mean? So I played linebacker, we went 4-6. So then I transferred to Lakeland High School, which is a powerhouse in Central Florida. And I just like the team was stacked. Like we were stacked. We had 5 stars, 4 stars. So I was like, let me get in where I fit in. Let me go play online.
Well, it's worked out pretty darn well. Not only were you first team ACC last year, you were given the Jacobs Blocking Trophy, which is the most outstanding blocker in the ACC. You're named to multiple first team All-American teams. I don't know if you pay attention to things like Pro Football Focus, but some people do. You were the third highest graded guard in the entire FBS in pass blocking. You were the third highest rated guard in all of FBS in run blocking. So that's a pretty good combination, Willie. I like not a bad place to be. I want to, if you don't mind, I at the Senior Bowl and I have some really bad video I want to share with you, like bad quality, not bad video. And there's 3 different plays I want to show to you, and there's then a clip I want to play for you as well. So I'm gonna play one of these for you, and get your initial reaction. I'm sure you remember this. This is your first rep against Cameron Jackson, okay? And I think this was your first rep overall. So here we go. You're going to be in the middle here. Big Cam Jackson. And there we go. And Cam Jackson swims by you. All right? And so I'm going to admit something to you, Willie. At that point, I thought, man, this little guy, I'm not sure it's going to work against big 340-pound Cam Jackson. Well, I talked to Cam Jackson at the combine, and the sound is going to be a little bit hard to hear because it's very loud there. But I asked him about that play, and he's like, yeah, we joked about it afterwards. But then I asked him, like, who stood out to you at the Senior Bowl? Who's like one of the best guys you went against? And here was his answer.
Willie.
Yeah.
Like I think I was like the only rep he lost, I believe, in one-on-one. So, but yeah, I say him. Just like he's a competitive guy. Just like he know how to anchor real well.
Also, like,
I'm just ready to see. I'm just ready to see.
Just like
I don't know if you could hear. Could you hear that, Willie?
Yes, I could. Yes.
How's it feel to know that first that first rep? I got a couple more reps I'm going to show for you. That a little different outcome, but That first rep. Tell me about that first rep, and then tell me about hearing from Cam about how he respects your game.
That first rep, like it was my first time playing center, and God knows how long. I think it was like about a year and a half. My first like rep ever in a one-on-one rep. Just getting the nerves off. But you lose, you win some, you lose some. That's just life. And just to hear Cam talk about my play style, it's great. Two great players. He's a great player as well. I can't wait to go to battle in the NFL.
All right, so let me play you a couple other clips here. I'm not sure how much. I'm sure you've probably seen your tape here from the Senior Bowl. This is a little bit better angle, and I think this is you going up against Tyrion Ingram Dawkins from Georgia. A little different outcome here. How'd you feel about that rep?
I feel like I lost it a little bit. I feel like I lost that one, but
why do you feel like what constitutes a loss for you?
I was kind of like in the back foot a little bit.
So you just don't want to get pushed back at all. You don't want to give it.
No, not at all. Not at all.
So then there's this rep. So this rep did not go quite as viral as I think it should have. But this is you going up against TJ Sanders, who some people have late first round pick, early second round grade on. There's a lot that happens in this game.
Ooh.
Hopefully you heard that and not just saw that, Willie.
You play it one more time?
Yeah, you got it. Let's do that one more time. There we go, right here. Willie Lampkin versus TJ Sanders.
Ooh.
So, Willie, I mean, you step over him and then you go back and you shake his hand. That was interesting, man. Tell me about that whole rep.
Honestly, man, like I just kind of like blacked out. Like when I went like doing the rep, like I just did the rep, and I like just felt like I kind of felt him like falling after I punched. So it's something like my instinct was just like snatch him down. So I just snatched him down, and the rest is history.
Must have felt pretty good. I mean, you seem to be able to anchor against guys. I had other clips. You going against Deion Walker, who's 350 pounds and 6'8", and you not giving up an inch to him. Being able to hold your ground against guys that size, where does that come from?
Just that weight room strength. Having that core strength. Having that strength. I say like working in the weight room really hard. Core strength, and that wrestling background, having that leverage, and that a good hand placement as well.
So, I mean, I was certain after the showing you had at the Senior Bowl that you'd be going to the Combine, and I'm guessing you probably were too. What went on there? Did you hear any of the conversation, or why the Combine invite didn't come?
Honestly, man, I didn't hear anything. I was in the background. I didn't hear anything. I would have thought I would have got the invite, but. Like I was like, wow, like I didn't even get the invite. It was kind of like wow. And I was like, wow, that's crazy.
So what, like the conversations you had with teams at the Senior Bowl, how'd those go? Any of them stand out to you?
Oh yes. I would say the Ravens, the Commanders, the Saints, Seahawks, the Broncos, 49ers. Teams like that, like teams like those.
Well, there's going to be a lot of folks listening to this show that want to hear more about the Seahawks conversation. How did that conversation go? And were they specifically interested in you? At what positions were they interested in you to play?
Offensive line and fullback.
Mm-hmm. Are they the only ones that are talking about fullback, or did that come up in other conversations?
Really, a lot of conversations. I would say more than 10.
So, have you played fullback before?
Like little league. I think when I was in 4th grade, 5th grade, like little league.
What do you like when you hear that as an idea? Is that something you're excited about? You're like, I don't know about this. What's your reaction when people talk about fullback?
It's kind of like 50-50. You train. I train all my life to play O-line, so it's like I want to play O-line. You know what I mean? But if I can help my team out in any kind of way, yes, I'm willing to play fullback.
So you end up not going to the combine, but now this is the season of 30 visits where teams can bring people out. And I'm curious if that's a situation where you've started to have any visits planned, or is that still in the future?
In the future, not yet. Hopefully, soon with the Seahawks. Hopefully.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the Seahawks, as you know, moving with Clint Kubiak moving to a zone blocking scheme, he uses a fullback more than others. The Ravens are another team that do use a fullback, and they have a 300-pound fullback.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, Willie. A lot of the fullbacks nowadays are defensive linemen that move over to play fullback, and they're looking for that aggression. Your ability to move and maybe target. How do you feel? Like a lot of fullback is not having the guy directly in front of you to start. How do you feel about your ability to target on the run and maybe see lanes to lead a running back behind you?
I feel like with my experience in Little League with playing running back, fullback, I have a little bit of experience. So, it's gonna be probably, I would say, like, it's gonna take some time to get used to since I'm always playing online, but it's something that I could do.
One of the last questions I had for you, like you've got some interesting teammates over the years. At UNC. I think you play with Drake May, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Marion Hampton, running back. Talk to folks about those two guys and what it was like to play with them.
Elite. Drake May, elite. Amari Hampton, elite. The only running back I think in this class to have 1,500 yards back-to-back seasons. Drake May, it's the film shows itself, the stats, it shows itself. He went second overall, first year, first Pro Bowl for Drake May. So I guess UNC, what do they say, like UNC league school, something like that. Mm-hmm. So go to UNC, go UNC as well. Go Tar Heels.
Who's given that you had so much success as a blocker, who was like one of the tougher guys that you went against on the defensive line?
I would say Joshua Farmer, Daryl Jackson, definitely the FSU mm-hmm. defensive line, they were stacked this past season.
Talk about Joshua Farmer a little bit.
Oh yeah, he's a beast. He's a handful. When we went to Florida State to play them, it was tough blocking him. Especially him and Daryl Jackson. They're both 6'6", 330. So I was like, in the interior, you got both interior 6'6", 330. You're like, wow. And I'm like, it was a good game. Both of us had a good game.
All right. So last thing, what's coming up for you? I assume pro day at some point, or what's up next for Willie Lampkin?
Just the pro day. Just pro day. Trying to have a great pro day, and then take some visits after that, hopefully.
What are you hoping to prove there? What are you hoping to show?
Oh, definitely that I could, be versatile. People have already seen that I could be versatile on the offensive line. So, show my versatility at fullback as well during the workout. Show the coaches that I have speed, that I'm quick and I'm strong.
Willie, I am rooting for you, man. I think you are an unbelievable player. I think you're going to make it in this league, and you're going to make a lot of people regret passing on you. So all the best to you. Hopefully we'll connect again later, but good luck in all that's coming for you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me on.
All right. Thank you. That is Willie Lampkin from University of North Carolina. I think one of the coolest prospects in this draft. Obviously a really good guy as well. And what did you hear there? Some news. He has met with the Seahawks at the Senior Bowl. As for what it's worth, they meet with all of the players, meet with all the teams. So it's not unique that he met with them. But when I asked him which team meeting stood out, Seahawks were one of them. And he also said hopefully he ends up with the Seahawks, and the Seahawks talked to him about playing fullback. So also interesting, like that he was a guard, and so it does make some sense. It was his first rep at center, the first time going 1v1 against a 340-pound Cam Jackson. But you also heard from Cam Jackson at the combine there that this guy is one of the guys he had the toughest time going against. That was the one rep that Willie Lampkin lost all week as far as he was concerned. So, interesting guy and someone who is one to keep an eye on at the fullback position and see how things fare there. All right. So that is Willie Lampkin. Great having him on. By the way, I'm still working on getting Jordan Phillips on, the defensive tackle from Maryland, who I'm a huge fan of as well. So we'll have that coming soon. Now, let's do some drafts. Let's do some mock drafts. And I am going to show you my screen here. And this is a mock draft where, as I said before, I have made the deal to trade DK Metcalf to the Las Vegas Raiders for pick 37, their pick in the second round, and pick 73 in the third round. Now, what that means is that I traded back, by the way, DK Metcalf, and I traded pick 137. So this is a fourth round pick that the Raiders got. Now, in order to do this, unfortunately, I have to make the picks for both teams. So I'll be picking for the Raiders and for the Seahawks, but I'll just pick whatever for the Raiders. We'll move along. But I had to consummate the trade and make that happen. And here we go. So here we are at pick 18 in the first round. And again, this is the first one without DK Metcalf. All right. So there's Tyler Booker sitting there, and I'm, Ray Roberts is out there. Other people are out there, feel differently about this. I've seen now Daniel Jeremiah. I've seen Lance Zierlein. I think those are the two. Both talk about, and maybe it's Dane Brugler, but like the gap scheme fit with Tyler Booker. And I've talked to you about his athletic testing and how it's concerning to me. I am out on Tyler Booker in the first round. So I'm not going to be picking Tyler Booker in the first round, at least for a while, until I see differently. I don't think, yes, could he potentially be a fit for his own blocking scheme? Could he learn it? He doesn't have to learn it. Would he be able to be coached up in ways that would help? Sure. But I think that if you want to get the most out of Tyler Booker, you're a gap scheme team. And so spending your first round pick on a low ceiling athlete who then you need to project to being a good fit and not even leveraging his best strength, which is gap scheme, I'm not in on that. So here we are. You've got some names. Derek Harmon's a guy I really like. We haven't spent a lot of time talking about him. I think the Seahawks really like him. I don't think it's crazy that he could be a pick here, but Nick Emenwari is sitting there, and that is likely going to be my pick. But let's take a look at some of the receivers that are there. Now, Matthew Golden has gone. Tet McMillan has gone in this case. Tyler Warren has gone. Could you put some more emphasis on receiving tight ends? Colston Loveland is still there. Emeka Egbuka is there. Now, Emeka Egbuka to me is he's like a really solid number 2 receiver. And I just don't see him as a game breaker. And so you could take Egbuka and have him and JSN, and you'd be a very solid receiving core. But you wouldn't be very explosive. So I'm not super tempted about Egbuka there. Luther Burden is a really interesting combination of a lot of attributes. A little bit smaller, a little bit more of a yards after catch guy, tackle breaker. He's more interesting to me as a complement to JSN in terms of what you could do with him. Egbuka was kind of a no for me. He becomes a possibility. But I'll tell you this. I look at this. Donovan Jackson is sitting there at 36 on this board. I would consider Donovan Jackson right here. But what I'm going to do is take the player that I think is the best player available here and super high ceiling in Nick Emenwari. So we're going to take Nick Emenwari, and we're going to see what happens at pick 37. Now, unfortunately, Donovan Jackson, Gray Zabel are gone. So this gamble did not work out. This gamble did not work out because I was really hoping for one of those two guys to be sitting there. So now you've got Tyleik Williams, who's an interesting interior guy, Ezeraku, who I think is a decent. I think he's similar to the pass rushers the Seahawks already have in Boye Mafe and Derek Hall. And then you get into Ursary, who's not a guy I'm a big fan of. Jackson Dart, you might have to pull the trigger here if you want to get him. Jonas Avenaya is there. Maybe a little bit early to take Jonas Avenaya. Tate Ratledge is still sitting there. But again, remember, we're picking again in 13 picks. So I am still of the mind of take the best player available. But I also am thinking about receiver. I think ideally, if you're trading DK Metcalf, you're using one of a pick in the either day 1 or early day 2 on that receiver position. I do think, like generally, I would think you'd want to spend a day 2 pick on receiver. So as I look through this group, I think the move to make here is to take Jackson Dart, but I really am uncomfortable because then I'm going to have this Sophie's choice at 50 of either offensive lineman or receiver. And this is the challenge of now having receiver be a need for you. So I know people are probably screaming about Mike Green. I'm not. Mike Green's not going to last this long, and I'm personally I don't think he's a great fit for what the Seahawks are doing. So I'm kind of going up and down this list. I think ultimately what I'm going to do here, I'm going to take Tate Ratledge. I'm going to take Tate Ratledge with this pick. And I think that's like between him and Jonas Avenaya, I feel like Ratledge is a little bit more polished, but I could go for really either. So I'm going to go ahead and take a guard because I think you really need to get one. And then we're here at pick 50 and Jackson Dart's still there, but now you're starting to look at receiver. Now Trey Harris is an interesting guy. It's interesting. You can be picking between two Ole Miss guys. He's a pretty good contested catch guy. You've got, it's interesting to me that Deion Walker is still this high. I think that's way too high for him. Max Hairston, who I like, but there were some pretty concerning allegations that came out against Max Hairston, so I'm kind of leaning away from him for the time being. But this is where it gets interesting. Jaden Higgins, the Iowa State guys. Jaden Higgins, 6'4", 214, and Jalen Knoll, who we know the Seahawks have met with and is more explosive. I also want to see, is Jack Besh here anywhere, or has he already been taken? So let me just see offensively receiver. Jack Besh is still there as well. Now, Jack Besh, to me, is a really interesting fit. He is a deep ball player, but not from a speed perspective, more from a contested catch perspective. He's a good route runner, and he's the best blocker of those three guys. So Xavier Restrepo's another guy who's interesting, but he's really purely a slot. Do you take a slot and move JSN really purely outside? Jalen Royals is another name from Utah State. All those guys are really interesting. And so I'm kind of sitting here thinking I would probably trade back again, to be honest, in this case, but I'm going to try to play it straight. So with these guys available, I think I take Jackson Dart is what I do here. And I take a chance that I can then in the third round, now that I got 2 third-round picks, that I can get a receiver there with one of those picks. All right, the Raiders. Okay, this is a Raiders pick. We'll pick that guy, and now the Seahawks are up. Okay, so this is the pick that the Seahawks picked up in this trade with the Raiders for DK Metcalf. So here you are at 73, and now you've got tight end options. Mason Taylor is a really interesting name. You've got Carson Schwechtenser, the linebacker. TJ Sanders, who we just saw get stepped over by Willie Lampkin. Really interesting name. but you do have some of these receivers, and I really feel like it would be tough to pass on the receivers here. Mason Taylor might be the guy that lets you play a lot of 12 personnel, or maybe even 13 personnel. And I look at the receivers, it's starting to get a little thin. So what I do here is I take Jack Besh. I just don't take the chance. Now, if I look at this, let me double check. So we're at pick. Oops, there we go. We're at pick 73. We're up again in 10 picks. So do I take the risk of taking the best player available? So I think what I'm going to do here, I'm going to take a real risk. I'm going to take TJ Sanders, which is a big risk. I'm kind of deciding between him and Mason Taylor. Let's take Mason Taylor. Let's take Mason Taylor and really try to give the offense some young weapons. So the next pick is going to be receiver. Here we are. TJ Sanders is still there, by the way. But now we're going to go receiver. And I'm going to hope that the guy I really want, Jack Besh, is still there. And he is. So Jack Besh is there. We're going to take Jack Besh. And now you've got 3 young guys, weapons on offense that you've added. Interesting there. Now we can kind of turn our attention back. So this is the Raiders picking. We're going to pick, you can get Gunnar Helm and enjoy that. And now we're going to this is the Raiders picking again. We'll give them a running back. Don't really care. Hide, Raiders picking again. Now this is the thing. We traded away our 4th round pick, and that means we're having to wait a while for the Seahawks next pick at 173. And here we are at that pick for the Seahawks. You've got Jonah Monheim, who I really like at center. You got Miles Frazier, who I really like at guard. Elijah Roberts, a little light at defensive tackle. Aeneas Peebles, Ty Robinson. Clay Webb is available. Olufemi Oladejo is there. Upton Stout has really dropped down this list. So I'm going to go ahead and take... Let me look here. So I think Clay Webb is kind of the most appealing of these options. But we've gone a lot on offense. I'm really tempted to get a defensive player. Let's take a look at defensive tackles, as we have not gone into that pool. And Ty Robinson is, I think, the guy that I probably go after here. But as I look down this list, I mean, we've kind of missed out on a lot of the defensive tackles. Like Cam Jackson isn't even here. Jamari Caldwell isn't here. So I'm going to go ahead and take Ty Robinson from Nebraska. I like Ty Robinson and his upside. This is the Raiders picking. The Raiders are picking a lot of running backs with my draft for them. Seahawks are back up. And Olufemi Oladejo, easy pick there. I'm not going to spend a lot of time thinking about it. I think he's a really, really cool guy. Interesting player. Carson Vincent is rarely appealing to me. I like him quite a bit. Jackson Haas as a blocking tight end, but I don't think you're going to draft another tight end. There's Willie Lampkin. We could do it. Maybe we'll take Willie with our last pick. I'm going to take Carson Vincent. I really like him as a project player. The Raiders are up. Raiders are up again, giving them all sorts of random people. They have so many running backs now, they don't know what to do with them. Okay, so here we are at our final pick for the Seahawks. And is Willie Lampkin there? Did he get picked? Come on. Did Willie Lampkin get picked? That's unfortunate. That would have been a fun way to end it. Well, so be it. Oh, I love Jalen Travis. That's a hard one to pass on. We have not gotten a linebacker. I mean, Mac McWilliams is a guy I really like at corner. We have not drafted a corner. So since if I hadn't already taken Carson Vincent, I would have definitely taken Jalen Travis here, who I love. He's 6'8", was a freak at the combine. We're gonna take Mac McWilliams, who I like at corner, add him to the pile. All right, so this is your Seahawks first draft with trading DK Metcalf, and this is trading him to the Raiders. You get a second and a third, and you give up a fourth. So you get Nick Emenwari, the safety. You get Tate Ratledge, the guard. Jackson Dart, the quarterback. Mason Taylor, the tight end. Jack Besh, the receiver. Ty Robinson, defensive tackle. Olufemi Oladejo, an edge player. Carson Vincent, and Mac McWilliams. Curious how people feel about this. Curious how people feel about having these extra picks and how this worked out. Now, what this would mean depth chart wise is now Nick Emenwari is your other safety. By the way, Nick Emenwari can play receiver as well. This came out recently, and he's got some packages where he can do that. So he could be a weapon for you. But your receiving core is now going to be Jackson Smith and Jigba, Jake Bobo, Cody White, Jack Besh, are the main guys you'd have there. I'd ideally want to take 2 receivers. If I thought about it, I would have taken a second receiver in the 7th round, just to give us as many chances as possible to find another weapon. But then you've also got Mason Taylor to go with Noah Fant and AJ Barner. And what I like about this is Noah Fant in the last year of his deal, Mason Taylor and AJ Barner can supplant him. And now you've got Jackson Dart, quarterback, and you could have a young offense growing together. Jackson Dart, Mason Taylor, AJ Barner, Zach Charbonnet, this whole crew is interesting. I like Jack Besh as a real fit for this offense. He's a great blocker. He's tenacious, high percentage contested catcher. I just think he's a dog, and I think he's people compare him to Puka Nacua. I think that's unfair. I don't think there's a lot of Puka Nacuas hanging around. But I think he's a physical style receiver that is in that direction. And then, at the end here, I think the part that I like least is I think we really missed on the defensive tackle side. And so we'll see about that. So let me do one more mock. I'm going to do one more mock in a different simulator. All right. And I've already made the trade. So again, we'll have to play around differently here. But in this mock, we've got Shamar Stewart sitting there. Tyler Warren is sitting there. I don't know how realistic that is, but he's there. Nick Emenwari is there. Gray Zabel is there. So what to do, folks? What to do? Let's play this one differently. I'm pretty sure that one of the guards we like will be there at 37. So let's not play this too different. Let's take Tyler Warren. I think he's the high ceiling guy. I would be fine with him or Shamar Stewart or Nick Emenwari. But we're going to take Tyler Warren first, okay? Because you've just gotten rid of DK Metcalf, and now you are trying to add more weapons. So Tyler Warren is the first pick. Now you get to pick 37, and you really want to look at guard, but gosh darn it, they went. So I got snaked again. I really thought that would I thought it would work out, and it didn't. So this is the second straight time. This is what you got to really understand. I'm not taking Tyler Booker here. I mean, I could, but maybe at 37 it makes sense. Kind of go back and forth. I'm going to play this draft very differently, just to kind of play around. We're going to take Luther Burden here. It's not my first instinct, but I think he's a first round talent receiver. We're going to see what happens at pick 50. And we've not drafted an offensive lineman yet. So there's Jonas Avenaya. You got to draft an offensive lineman at this point. You got Jonas Avenai, you got Tate Ratledge, you got Jared Wilson. So let's play the game for a second that the Seahawks don't sign Drew Dahlman, but they sign Will Fries, guard. If that's the case, then I think an interesting pick here is Jared Wilson. I'm going to take Jared Wilson here as a center, future center for you early. We talked to Dane Brugler about him maybe sneaking into the second round, so we're not going to take any risks. Wait, what's going on? This is, I guess I'm having to make a pick for the Raiders. Excuse me while I make a pick for the Raiders. Let's get a long snapper. Raiders are going to draft a long snapper. We're back to the Seahawks. All right. So interestingly, we played this, and now at pick 73, the Seahawks are back up, and Jonas Avenai is sitting there. Marcus Bowe is sitting there. Those guys are both really interesting, but TJ Sanders is sitting there. Omar Norman Lott. This is a chance we could. So interestingly, guys, this is a fascinating one. You've got Jack Besh, who you could add as another receiver and really try to take the best young receivers possible and hope that one of them at least works out. You could get Tate Ratledge and pair him with Jared Wilson, which is kind of the dream team. You've got Jaden Higgins, another receiver who would be a really good add and a tall guy that's different than the other ones. You've got Omar Norman Lott, who I really love defensive tackle-wise. TJ Sanders, who's an interesting defensive tackle as well. I'm not as high on him. And then you got Jonas Avenai. So there are some really interesting choices here. And as I look at this, my instinct is to take Omar Norman Lott, partially because you haven't gotten anyone else there, and I think he's a high upside player. But it's really hard to pass on. I mean, you need a safety, but these receivers, there's Josh Farmer a little bit later. Man, this is a tough one, guys. This is really tough. I love pairing Tate Ratledge or Jonas Avenai with Jared Wilson. But at the end of the day, I think I go Omar Norman Lott. I just think he's got, of those guys, I think has such a high impact potential. So now the Seahawks are back up at 82. This is the benefit of getting an extra second and an extra third in this draft. Now you lose your fourth, but you get a lot of these top 100 picks. So you've got your defensive tackle. Now you can go back to receiver. You could go a different defensive tackle. We just heard Willie Lampkin talk about Josh Farmer, who is a massive man in the middle. Be a great add there. I don't think you need two defensive tackles. I think you go to receiver. I think you take either Higgins or Knoll. And in this case, because I took Luther Burden, who's a little on the smaller side, I think I take Jaden Higgins. I add him to Luther Burden. I add him to Jackson Smith and Jigba. I think you can start to have a pretty interesting receiving core. Now we're back to the Raiders. Raiders are going to take the most long snappers of any team ever in the draft. It's going to be great. So sorry, Pete. I don't mean to screw you over here, but I don't want you to take any of the guys that I want. So people are really surprised at this huge run on long snappers by the Raiders. If you're just coming in now, the reason I'm picking for the Raiders is because I made a trade between the Seahawks and the Raiders for the Raiders' second round pick, number 37 overall, and their third round pick, number 73, in exchange for DK Metcalf and the Seahawks pick in the fourth round, pick 137. So here we are in the fifth round. All right. And we have not drafted a quarterback yet, so that's not a bad thing to consider. We do have our tight end, but we could add Jackson Haas to that. There are some more receivers. Holland Pierce is an interesting guy there. Jack Kaiser. I think that's my pick. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. I think Jack Kaiser is my pick. I love him as a coverage backer. The Raiders, they're going to draft every single long snapper. Then they're going to let's go to kicker. Okay, they're going to add a kicker. Oh no, did I do that? God dang it. Shoot. All right. Well, the Seahawks drafted a kicker. I don't think that's the worst thing in the world, but that screws up the draft a little bit. All right. So, That's so funny. I love Damian Martinez as a back. I like Jaden Blue as a back. Those guys are both super fast game breakers. Jalen Reed at safety is interesting. Upton Stout at corner. There's some Jackson Slater, another offensive lineman, although I could make the case for another offensive lineman here, to be honest. Let's take a look at offensive line. Jackson Slater, Joshua Gray, who I liked. Yeah, I mean, I could make the case for Jackson Slater right here pretty easily. Let's look here. So funny. I'm so annoyed that I picked a kicker. That just screws everything up. Let's do this. Let's take Jalen Reed at safety. I think that's a smart pick. And let's give, now it's definitely the Raiders. We're going to give them a kicker too. Gosh darn it. They're going to give them multiple kickers. It's going to be a fascinating story. People are going to be so confused. This is the Raiders again. They draft 3 kickers and a bunch of long snappers. Their special teams is going to be unbelievable. All right, so here we are at pick 236. And you got Josh Gray, who I like. Jalen Conyers. Do we have Willie Lampkin anywhere on here? Do we have Willie Lampkin? Is he on here anywhere? Do they even have? Maybe he already got picked. But assuming not, I am really tempted by Joshua Gray. I really like him, but I think Jalen Conyers makes a ton of sense for the Seahawks as a kind of do-everything player. We're going to get Jalen Conyers, add him to the list. And here we go. So Seahawks end up with Tyler Warren, Luther Burden, Jared Wilson, the center. So Tyler Warren, the tight end, Luther Burden, the receiver, Jared Wilson, the center, Omar Norman Lott, defensive tackle, Jaden Higgins, the receiver, Jack Kaiser, the linebacker, Andres Borregales, the kicker, who I did not intend to pick, but we got him. Jalen Reed, the safety, and Jalen Conyers, the kind of do everything Wildcat quarterback, tight end, and fullback. So, other than messing up with the kicker, I love this draft, to be honest. I think that you come out of this draft so much more dangerous. I think Tyler Warren is a huge weapon that you can play with that fits into Clint Kubiak's system. Luther Burden is a really interesting weapon at receiver and a lot of yards after catch, tackle breaker. Jared Wilson, the best center in this draft class, potentially. Love his fit as in the middle of your line. Omar Norman Lott, I think, is one of the highest ceiling defensive linemen in this class. I love the pairing of him with Byron Murphy. Then you add Jaden Higgins at receiver, 6'4" Jaden Higgins. I think that's a great thing to go along with Luther Burden and JSN. I think that's a remade receiving core. Think about that. Noah Fant, AJ Barner, and Tyler Warren at your tight ends. JSN, Jake Bobo, Luther Burden, Jaden Higgins, Cody White for receiver. I like that group. Now, we didn't get a quarterback in this class. Not, whatever, it happens. But then I just love that. And then Jack Kaiser is a great get late at linebacker. I think Jalen Reed is a great get late at safety. I think he's a good fit as a third safety. And then you get a guy that makes sense in Jalen Conyers. So even with the mess up at kicker in the 6th round, I still love this draft class. So I'm curious what you all think. That's my first 2 mocks with all of you, talking about what it might be like. This is one possible option of how the Seahawks draft could look after a DK Metcalf trade. Do you like it? Do you feel good about it? Do you feel like the team would be better? Do you feel like the team would be worse? Would you have made moves differently? Would you prioritize more receivers? Love to hear from all of you about that. So appreciate everybody for tuning in. Hopefully you loved that conversation with Willie Lampkin. Great guy. Would have loved to add him to one of those draft classes, but now we're going to go after him as an undrafted free agent, hopefully. But good stuff from him. Hopefully, getting a little bit of a taste of what this draft could look like is helpful as well. And then tomorrow, Jeff Simmons will join me. We will talk about free agency as we really turn our attention to free agent news and what's going on there. It looks like we have one super chat. Bryce Coots. Of course it's Bryce Coots. Giving away 10 Hawk Blogger memberships. Really appreciate you, Bryce. All that you do. It's great. And if you haven't gotten one of these free memberships, it's not that hard. You got to make sure that you have gifting turned on your YouTube account. And then you just got to engage with the channel. Like, subscribe, watch, and YouTube will give these free memberships to the most engaged folks. If you get one of these memberships, consider upgrading to club level where you get access to members only content as well. So appreciate everybody who's gifting those memberships and taking advantage of them. So with that, I bid you all adieu. Unless there's news that breaks, then I'll be back. Otherwise, I will see you tomorrow morning for Seahawk Saturday with Jeff Simmons. Until then, I'm Brian Nemhauser. This has been episode 347 of Hawk Blogger Mornings.